Horrible. Ever since he claimed that former President Obama wiretapped him, President Trump has engaged in a variety of efforts to justify that allegation as a way to deflect attention, of course, from the investigation into his campaign's potential collusion with Russia during the campaign. Well, today the president went further, suggesting to the New York Times that former national security advisor Susan Rice did something wrong by requesting the names of Americans swept up by incidental surveillance. Well, it's actually routine for a national security advisor to do her job, to make such a request for intelligence purposes. And it's the agencies themselves, the intel agencies themselves, not Susan Rice or anybody at NSC, that decides whether to grant those requests. In spite of that, the president told the Times that this is, quote, such an important story for our country and the world. It is one of the big stories of our time. However, he declined to say if he had personally reviewed new intelligence to bolster his claim, but pledged to explain himself, quote, at the right time. Well, the president's newest unsubstantiated allegation is likely another attempt to deflect from the Russian investigations, which could implicate top associates close to him. In fact, two members of the House Intelligence Committee, Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro and Denny Heck, both predicted yesterday the investigation into Russia and Trump will lead to convictions here. Let's watch.
Well, have you seen any hard evidence of collusion yet?
I guess I would say this, that my impression is I wouldn't be surprised after all of this is said and done that some people end up in jail.
He said he would not be surprised if people ended up going to jail. I will be surprised if people don't end up going to jail.
Well, this also comes as the Financial Times reports that the FBI is devoting more resources to its investigation of Trump starting next month. Joining me right now is Glenn Thrush, White House correspondent for the New York Times, who interviewed the president today. Shane Harris, the senior writer for national security for the Wall Street Journal, and Bill Gavins, a former assistant FBI director in New York. Bill, I want to start with you. Tell me about the FBI and what it means when they create a special unit in D.C. What does that tell you about the effort?
Chris, it shows you that there's two important things here: the gravity of the case involved in the concentration of manpower to arrive at a conclusion. This isn't one of those cases where after a year's worth of investigation it can end up with a question mark. This is a case that has to be resolved. We have to arrive at a conclusion as to what happened in this case. So the way it's set up right now from an administrative standpoint, headquarters, everything falls through headquarters, so any leads are immediately covered. Headquarters has contact with all the other intelligence and investigative agencies with their headquarters in Washington, D.C. as well. So it's one of those things where you gather the information, you in the field, you bring it back through headquarters. It also gives the director the ability to have a granular upgrade every single day or every minute that he wants it if he hears something.
What about if you pick a list of the dramatis personae here, like in a Shakespeare play, and you go through Carter Page, you go through Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, you go through a list of every name we've heard connected to Russia. Would you be assured now, looking at this investigation, within a year, we will know all communications between those people and Russians? Will we know it?
Chris, I've been around long enough and been gone long enough to understand that you could never reach any definitive conclusion with this much information that we have. There is so much more to be done and so much more information to be garnered that it's very difficult to say when this thing will end.
But do you believe that we'll know everything about those people I mentioned, what they had to do with Russia?
I have no way of knowing. That would be just a wild guess, and I don't do those kinds of things.
Let me go to Glenn Thrush on this. Glenn, these efforts by the administration have had success. They've been able to divert attention. They've been able to throw up a name like Susan Rice. They've been able to throw up Donna Brazile. They blew that one up the other day. They throw these names out like firecrackers, and I mean, they explode and they get in the press. Is this just the power of the president we have to live with, that mainstream journalism has to cover whatever malarkey, to use a Joe Biden expression, throws out there?
Well, thanks for look, the president of the United States. I am taking a shot,
okay? I am taking a shot. All right, you heard it.
Look. If the president, the point is, if candidate Donald Trump makes these kinds of allegations, that's one thing. The fact that the president of the United States, sitting in the Oval Office with the full power of the presidency, decides to use the bully pulpit of an interview, and by the way. We did not prompt him to start talking about Susan Rice. We came into the office, my colleague Maggie Haberman and I, to talk about infrastructure. We had 10 detailed questions to talk with him about infrastructure. And boom, right out of the box, he starts talking about Susan Rice. First, he makes an allegation, essentially, that there are other Obama administration officials who are complicit in the same kind of unmasking behavior. We asked him for the names. He refused to provide them. He then said again that this was one of the biggest stories in the world, and how dare we as a news organization not cover it. We informed him that we have, in fact, covered it. And then in terms of his characterization of the case, as he moved along, it became obvious to me that it was important to ask whether or not he viewed this in criminal terms. And he accepted that predicate when I asked him, do you think that you did anything wrong criminally? He said that. I think when the President of the United States says this, for good or for ill, we have to pay attention to it. It is smart tactical politics, Chris, insofar as it diverts attention. And one thing he said in the interview that is true, Susan Rice is not a particularly polished public performer. We saw that on the Sunday shows after Benghazi. Sometimes she appears to be sort of defensive and a little bit skittish. She wasn't great on Andrea Mitchell yesterday. And this is a president who's very much looking, as you said, to change the narrative. And he pounced on it. That said, from a repertorial perspective, there are questions that need to be asked. But as you know, a lot of the experts that we've interviewed as an organization have said it is highly unlikely that Ambassador Rice's behavior represents a widespread pattern of surveillance against the Trump campaign.